Well, hey there. Welcome to another edition of What Barrie's Talking About from Barrie 360. I'm Dan Blakeley. On this week's program, what's going on in the home building industry? The Residential Construction Council of Ontario says there's so much potential, but housing projects have been shelved and the industry has hit a wall. Housing starts are down an average 40% in the 34 municipalities the council studied, including Barrie. It's been working quietly in the background as the homeless crisis continues to grow, but Barrie Cares is starting to make some noise. Have you heard of the Wind Phone, a new tool to help with healing and health? And we begin our weekly updates on the Barrie Colts as they gallop through the OHL season. We get the conversation started after this. So where's all the housing we keep hearing about? Incentives are in place, some red tape has been cut, but there are not a lot of shovels in the ground. The Residential Construction Council of Ontario has been studying the matter and given 22 of 34 municipalities a failing grade. Barrie 360's Ian Maclennan is with Council President Richard Lyall.
Richard, tell us about this report that came out. It looked at a number of municipalities, and alarmingly, 22 of them were given an F in terms of new home starts. If you could just package this, how this all came about.
Sure. One of the things we wanted to look at was the fact that a lot of the numbers that were being referred to and assumptions about the condition of the industry were based on sort of lagging indicators, lagging data. It wasn't up-to-date data. So we realized that, and a lot of people were not getting the severity of what it is that we're facing. So on the ground, we were seeing what's happening and have been seeing what's happening, but the reports just weren't covering it. So we got together with Mike Moffat and thought we'd come up with a more current, accurate set of data. And then we thought, well, okay, how do we sort of relay this to the public? And we thought, well, there's these targets, and you got what's happening at the municipal level. So we put two and two together. But the starts data and the sales data, those are the two things that we kind of updated and made more current. And then, everyone understands a report card, right? And housing, the housing crisis is a very complex issue, and the solutions are relatively complicated too, although to a certain extent they're clear now, in my mind, at any rate. But so we wanted to be able to relay what exactly is happening now and just how important it is and how big it is, because our industry, the new housing industry, became the biggest industry in the province. And so, we'd see these reports where, a steel or an auto plant or something would be laying off 200 people, and that's not good, don't get me wrong, but we were thinking, wow, compared to us, it's not exactly that big a deal. And the reasons why we got here, well, as I said, they're complex. The way we get out of this, there's some very key things that need to happen. We're not there yet, and we need to get there.
Now, you compared recent numbers to January-June averages from 2021 to 2024 compared to the first 6 months of 2025. Let's focus on Barrie, because Barrie, among the majority, also registered an F in a number of categories. Touch on what is happening in Barrie from the results that came out of the study.
Well, the bottom line is that we're just not building the rental housing and the private market housing to the extent that we should be. We're not supplying it because the market has fallen. It's not necessarily a fault of Barrie. And Barrie, you've got a great mayor up there, and they've been very frustrated by certain things that they have not been able to achieve on municipal boundaries and things like that. So it's more of there's broader market conditions here at play. But we thought that the only way we can really sort of bring this down to earth is bring it down to the municipal level. And then we've had the province and, the federal government running around, the Housing Accelerator Fund, and cutting checks for, housing supply that wasn't really happening. So, but in Barrie's case, Barrie's got a fantastic future ahead of it. and that entire region. And that's an area of potential massive growth, which is great. But, it's not happening right now. And, of course, we've got some other economic problems that we're contending with.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm wondering, Richard, in terms of looking at Barrie. Is it just a market, is it a market issue, like supply, demand, on top of, we talk about tariffs, we talk about, different government programs. I think that for the average home buyer, it seems really overwhelming what's out there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This is why, as I said, it's a very complex situation. And Barrie, of course, is right on the edge of, the biggest city in Canada, and arguably, the engine of growth that's been referred to. So when you've had the growth that we've had or did have in housing and the run-up in housing that we had over the last decade, in fact, we've basically had pretty much a bull market in housing except for 2008 and 2017, there was a blip. It's been all systems go. And Barrie has, a lot of people have, they drove to Barrie to qualify, right? So that area became, and it's a beautiful area, fantastic. So a lot of people were interested in moving north, Innisfil, Keswick, Georgina, that kind of thing. So when that turns, the first thing that happens is the municipalities on the periphery suffer first and often suffer the greatest.
So you've been quoted as saying we're in the midst of the worst housing crisis in a generation. A number of programs are out there. We've heard numerous announcements from the province and the federal government. What are the keys to getting out of this hole? You've said we can dig out of it. So when do we start digging?
Well, there has been some digging that started already. The federal government has woken up to it. The province, Minister Flack, Bill 17, where they've made some changes to how the development charge system works, which is positive. At the municipal level, there's been varying degrees of progress made in certain areas, but in total, it hasn't been enough, because the biggest problem that Ontario faces is that outside of Vancouver, we have the worst housing crisis in North America. And when you look at our housing cost to incomes ratio, no one else does what we're doing. If we compare ourselves, for example, to Alberta, which can't build fast enough right now, but Alberta on a per capita basis is building 3 times the amount of housing that Ontario is, which is astounding. But that's because Alberta has gone through some very serious reforms, and they're continuing to do that. That government, the Alberta government, is, they've set housing, the affordability of housing, as a number one priority. So what can we do here? Well, we've got to get the taxes, fees, and levies down on new housing. They're still ridiculously high. It's in the 35% range on a new home. There have been announcements on that. The federal government announced a tax break on the HST, which was good for first-time home buyers. The province did not reciprocate on that, which is strange, because that's almost a down payment in some areas. The other thing that has to happen is we have to modernize our processes. There's things called building information modeling, digital twinning, these kinds of things, and prop tech, which is property and technology, to modernize how we approve things, because the approvals process is very complicated here, and we've got too many agencies involved.
So too much red tape?
Yeah, the red tape. Yeah, it's the red tape. And that's part of it. Yeah, there's the amount of it, and then it's the process through which we do things. So those things we can control. And in the last big correction in housing a generation ago, we didn't have those problems. So, for example, young people, young families today are not facing the same costs, the government-imposed costs and red tape that their parents faced. And it's incredibly unfair. We've done a disservice to, the next generation when we're, I think, arguably supposed to be leaving the world a better place.
And I think you were quoted, I'm paraphrasing maybe, but I think you talk about the next generation, you used the word crushed. Crushed,
yes, of course. And they're mad about it. We're working. There's a few groups of millennials and Gen Z people More Neighbors Toronto, for example, who are very active in this area and fighting for change because they feel they've been completely let down, and they're not wrong. I mean, and some of those leaders were some very bright young people from Ontario that went to work in the U.S. for a while, made some good money, came back home, and then they go, what on earth is happening with housing here? Why is it so expensive here compared to the U.S. or even Alberta? Like, for example, that comparison with Alberta. We line up with Alberta quite nicely, but the average cost of a home in Alberta is just over $500,000. In Ontario, we're just over $800,000. How do you account for that difference? And a big part of that is a huge part of it is the massive taxes, fees, and levies, and the red tape. And that came about because, as the market was moving up and we were experiencing prosperity and these development charges, nobody was really paying attention as to, okay, what are we doing with the cost of housing? We had problems at the lower end, because, of course, there are people in our world that don't have the means to pay for housing. They can't work for reasons that are no fault of their own, and they need to be helped. And we were looking at those things and how, for example, how the governments had dropped the ball on social housing, but the insidious increase in prices relative to incomes was, some of us were talking about that, but people weren't seeing it. It was sort of the death by 1,000 cuts. And then finally, when we finally woke up to it, and we said this would happen, is when the market turned.
Right.
And now we're in a situation where our resilience is being sorely tested by, the United States and that crazy tariff war.
And I find it very nomadic, too, that people have said, well, I moved to Toronto, I moved to Barrie, and, maybe they can work from home. That it becomes nomadic, that they begin even looking further north for something that is affordable and where they can be stable. I'm talking North Bay or Sudbury or something like that.
Yes.
That's frightening that they feel they have to go so far away to afford a home.
Well, and it's all behavioral psychology. You had some people, progressives, saying, well, people should go and live in little 3-bedroom apartments. Oh, but we don't build those because, there are various barriers to building 3-bedroom apartments, including the cost, and there's certain technical barriers. There's other things, too, that are included in this particular situation we're in. But, if you grew up in a home with a yard, and that kind of situation, and then later in life when you're looking to have a family, you want the same thing or something very similar to that, not some kind of Bolshevik apartment block somewhere. By the way, nothing wrong with living in apartments or condos or that kind of thing, but it's just that behavioral psychology will dictate you want that particular kind of nest, and you're going to go and find it. You're going to do everything you can to do that, and if that means going way out of town, you'll do that. And, of course, COVID taught us a lesson about remote work. Remote work works to a point, though, but we did learn lessons there. So you don't have to be in downtown Toronto or something like that. So that urban configuration has now changed completely, which should be helpful because some people said, why should all the growth go to Toronto and not other municipalities? Well, if you look at the economic development of cities, it's just the way things happen. But we dropped the ball on low-rise housing, and the missing middle housing, you've heard of that. Well, that's still kind of missing, although there are some changes coming through now. They've taken decades to get there. I mean, we've got these innovations which really aren't innovative at all. We should never have had the barriers to as of right apartment blocks on main streets and avenues. But low-rise, I mean, we're still building the same amount of low-rise housing on a per-unit basis, or were. I mean, it's down too now, but the same amount that we were building 50 years ago, which is crazy.
I understand, obviously, the impact on the construction industry and jobs too that are
huge,
that are being lost, or for planners. So there's a huge trickle down.
Oh, it's so painful to see right now. I mean, I'm talking to people, and it is so depressing. They've got to lay off their teams. There's crews that are looking for work. We're talking, and we've got a fantastic industry. We build in the U.S. it's nothing wrong with the industry, but the pain that's here now. So we need to shock this system and get it turned around. They need to get those taxes down, and which is first and foremost. That's an immediate hit that we can do. And that's why, the federal government said, well, we're going to cut the first-time homebuyer sales tax, which is good because that's almost 40% of the market. And that'll help first-time homebuyers and young families. But then it wasn't picked up by the province. But the province has turned around now and said, well, if the federal government cuts all the taxes, which would be great, they'll follow suit. My thinking about that is, well, why don't you start with the first-time home buyers and we can go off, go after the rest later. But we got to get those costs down. When you think about it, we drove the down payment so far out of reach. Young people, their living costs, rental costs, they couldn't save money. At one point in time, the government's answer was to come up with a new savings program for down payments. Sure, that's great. It'll take 25 years. Thank you very much. Yeah. We've got to wake up to the fact that we've just priced people out of the market. And the market, builders want to build. Construction companies want to do their work. But if you can't build something that the market can afford, it's not going to work. And that's where we're at right now. But this can get turned around very quickly. Those sales taxes and various other levies, the land transfer taxes, the DCs, development charges are a straight-up regressive consumer tax. If they can be effectively addressed, there's buyers that could move in and would move in because there's some deals out there. If relatively speaking, if you can get those costs down.
Barrie Cares has been keeping a close eye on the homeless situation in the city, the teardown of encampments, wondering how it can help, where it can help, and how to encourage others to step up. Barrie Cares Director Rolly Ramey stopped by to chat with Barrie 360's Julius Hearn.
For anyone that doesn't know what Barrie Cares is or does, can you describe the organization a little bit?
Yeah, our organization is originally started with a group of residents and business owners in 2024. So just a little bit over 2 years, or almost approaching 2 years, I should say. And then we brought in some strategic partners, the county, the city, RVH, the hospital, Canadian Mental Health and Associations. And we met weekly to discuss the most critical situation in our community right now, and that's homelessness.
Yeah, obviously maybe the biggest issue in the city right now in terms of how much it's been in the news as of late. When you see homelessness, what do you think the root causes are in this area?
There's so many different causes for homelessness. It can, when your economy's been stretching you and stretching you and stretching you, it's really interesting because people, their economic wealth has become smaller and smaller and smaller. Their resilience to that becomes less. And then you have the issue of not having enough houses or types of housing, so inventories are another problem. The government's been funding housing for like 50 years, but homelessness only for like 10 years. So it's kind of bringing those things back into sync, I think.
When you saw the state of emergency issued a couple weeks ago, what was your initial reaction?
Well, it was a breath of fresh air in some ways, in that it brought to a much higher level of attention some of the things that we're trying to address. And if the state of emergency allows us to expedite the process, create greater awareness, and put revenues or money streams into the areas that are needed the most, then it's a beautiful thing.
What does Barrie Cares aim to kind of, bridge that gap between, the change that's needed to address this crisis as soon as possible?
Well, I think Barrie Cares, how we've approached this, even prior to the state of emergency, we recognize there's about 60 or 70 organizations, not-for-profit organizations, helping the homeless or unhoused population in various different ways. And each one of them have their own little nuanced challenges. And I think what Barrie Cares is able to do is to bring those challenges under one roof and saying, if you can't do it this way, maybe we can help you that way. And so you create a collaborative and complementive process versus a competitive or individual process.
What do you think change looks like in this crisis?
Well, I think change looks like we're all in this together, recognizing that homelessness is an issue and that we can take a dignified approach to it. And that we meet people where they're at. We navigate them through the system. We understand it's not a linear process, that at times people are going to fall off or need to be remet at a different level. They thought they were ready for something, but maybe they're not quite ready. And so you readdress them and find them where they are. So, and then it's going to take time.
What do you suggest maybe the greater public do if they want to try and get involved in helping out the people that are in need and trying to get out of this crisis?
Well, first of all, I think you just need to have that compassionate thought and approach to it. And we also have to understand that we're all citizens, we're all residents in that, and we need to be treated as such. And that each one of us have a part to play in bringing this to a higher level or a greater, less of a homelessness problem.
How does one maybe bring that to, less of a homelessness problem and kind of make it more of a human side, maybe more human focus as opposed to a larger group of people who are in an encampment, for an example?
Well, through Barrie Cares, one of the ways is to donate to Barrie Cares. I mean, all the people within Barrie Cares don't make money, and we're all self-funding, and Barrie Cares itself isn't a service provider. But what we're going to do is make sure that those funds go into the greatest need or the most impactful one in the shortest period of time. The other way, I think, is to advocate or collaborate, and I think there's people that can do that. So if you're any way you want to be, I mean, we're going to have St. Mary's Church is having a symposium on homelessness. Barrie Cares will be there making a presentation as well. So that can give you some other reasons or ways to look at how you might be able to help within your community.
Obviously, in the last couple months, we've seen the introduction of heart hubs. I'm sure you've seen a lot about that. When you see that, how much do you think that is going to be, a positive thing for people in this crisis?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting because in Barrie Care's initial state, we were building out this campus of care, and many of the stakeholders that are in the heart hub and the application process were sitting at that table already. So I think our city was way further ahead, even bringing the application and it to fruition. We were almost shovel ready. The campus of care was a broader approach, and we've always thought there needed to be little hubs around. So the heart hub will allow it to address those that are having mental health or addiction issues, and we can add other little hubs or other campuses of care to address other elements of that. So I think it's an awesome.
How much does Barrie Cares focus on the addiction side of things?
Again, Barrie Cares is not the facilitator or the service provider. So we're going to go and we're going to listen to all the various different stakeholders and strategic partners and say, hey, where does this happen? I don't know the numbers specifically. I just know that through the Heart Hub, where we're able to take cohorts and we'll pick them up through their mental health needs and put them into the supports they want, or their addiction needs and get them through a hospital visit and detox. And then if they're not quite ready for them, that we recapture them again, drop them back into a support system that meets them where they're at.
Are there any other communities in Ontario, maybe even in Greater Canada, that you've seen a homelessness approach that might work in Barrie?
There are so many unique approaches across the country and across the world, and we've got our eyes on several different ones. Each one of them really have a unique approach, and I don't know that they're the full approach. I kind of liken it to a wheel with all spokes, and you need the more spokes in the wheel you have, the truer the wheel becomes. And so I think what we need to do is look at all those spokes that we see out there in various different communities, see how they can fit into the Barrie model, and then add that into our wheel.
If anyone wants to get involved with Barrie Cares, how can they get involved and where can they reach you potentially?
Well, the simplest way is go to barriecares.ca. There's a portal there where you can ask for information. We'll get back to you. And if you want to volunteer or donate or need us to come out and do a presentation on what we're all about, we're happy to reach out through there.
And you mentioned the symposium at the church coming up?
Yeah, on October 6th, the St. Mary's Symposium on Homelessness. Barrie Cares will be there and making one of the partners making a presentation.
We really appreciate your time, and thank you for coming in and helping us shed a light more on this greater issue in Barrie.
Well, let's hope we can add a little bit more dignity to our unhoused population and drive future successes.
Interesting phone booth at Scanlon Creek Conservation Area, home to a wind phone, a symbolic and powerful tool to help with healing and health. Barrie 360's Ian Maclennan was curious and reached out to Nicole Hamley at the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority and Lisa Snow at Oasis Center for Bereavement and Healing to find out more about it.
The wind phone, when was it unveiled? And I guess through to you, Nicole, how did this come together with Oasis?
I happen to have a contact at Oasis Bereavement, and I'm familiar with wind phones, partially because I pay close attention to, things that are out there to support people's physical health, but also mental well-being, things like that in nature. So I watch those things, but I also have a wind phone in my own home community. And I happened to notice that we did not have one in Simcoe County, and I was very interested in having one at Scanlon Creek. So I reached out to my contact at Oasis, and she connected me with Lisa, and we unveiled it at our event last Saturday.
To you, Lisa, this wind phone, it's a rotary dial phone. I've seen the picture of it. Maybe you could give us a visual, so to speak.
The wind phone concept came out of Japan back in, I believe, 2010. A man had lost his cousin, and he was, struggling with his grief. So he installed an old phone booth with a rotary phone inside of it in his very beautiful, peaceful garden, so that he could then walk out there, and the phone is not connected to anything. It's just sitting there. But he was able to connect with his cousin over the wind and have the conversations that he hadn't been able to have. So our wind phone, our version of that, is a small box, wooden box, looks like those little public libraries. Inside is a rotary phone, as well as a plaque that indicates what the purpose of the wind phone is, and that it is sponsored by Oasis and our community partners. And it's an opportunity. We install them in areas in the community that are peaceful, that are serene, somewhat private, for people to go and have those moments and have those conversations that they haven't had the ability to have.
Yeah, it's a good description. It does look like those little booths you see in certain municipalities where you open the door and there are a bunch of books that you can take out for yourself and what have you.
That's right, like a little public library, I think they call them, yeah.
Where in the conservation area in Scanlon is it located? What sort of decision-making came into that?
Well, as I said, I'm part of the education team, and we work really closely with our Conservation Lands Department. So I worked with my colleague, Dan Andrews, and we walked the property, and we thought about, who are some of the users at Scanlon. So obviously we're a public conservation area. We get a lot of visitors, dog walkers, hikers, that sort of thing. We've also got an outdoor education program running here, so we see lots of school students through the year. We see camp kids over the summer. So we really wanted to select the most appropriate spot where it wasn't, it was visible to people, so people could walk by, see signage, get themselves to it and make use of it, but at the same time, tuck it a little bit away so it was a little bit more quiet. So the decision was made to locate it down near an area we call our Discovery Play Garden. So it's about a kilometer drive deep into our property, and it's a nice space for outdoor play. There's a picnic pavilion nearby. There's some washrooms nearby, and we selected a specific spot adjacent to a memorial bench. We have a memorial bench program through our Lake Simcoe Conservation Foundation. So it's in a nice treed area next to a bench, and so it was enough that it was visual, but also, and private enough and tucked away enough that people would feel comfortable using it.
But you'd be able to find it if you were out and about in Scanlon, I guess.
You can see it from your car on the road. You got it.
And Lisa, obviously, we hear, about nature is, good for physical and mental health. And for someone who's grieving, that both maybe comes into play. So is this another added method for a person to grieve, but go through any physical or mental challenges that come with it?
Absolutely. It's exactly that. The wind phone is a very therapeutic tool. It's intended for people to connect to their surroundings, but also to connect to the people that they've lost in a unique way. And even just the rotary phone itself, the fact that you have to spin the dial, has a therapeutic aspect to it as well. And, I walked up to mine and didn't know what to do. So I dialed my childhood phone number so that I could have a conversation with my father.
Well, tell me more about that then. So is there, what does the signage say? And, that I was thinking just go up to it, but there's things you can do. You talk about dialing that phone?
Yeah, so the phone itself, it's not, like I said, it's not connected to anything. The phone is there. You can pick it up and hold the handset. You can dial the rotary phone, so you could dial a number, you could dial a name, and the plaque inside the box says, "The wind phone is for all who grieve. This unconnected phone carries your messages on the wind to those you have loved and lost. It is a phone for sharing memories and saying the goodbyes you never got to say. We hope you find peace and solace here."
And Lisa, are there wind phones anywhere else in your coverage area in York Region?
Yes, we have wind phones. So Oasis, as an organization, has partnered with municipalities across York Region and now with Bradford as well. We have 5 wind phones in York Region in Newmarket, East Gwillimbury, Keswick, King City, and Aurora, and now at Scanlon Creek. We have, and you asked about the experience and if we've had any feedback. And yes, we have. So, for example, we have a phone overlooking Ferry Lake in Newmarket. And at the time we were actually unveiling it, we had a bunch of people there on a day in July last summer. And later we got a message from a woman who had said she and her husband had come to that space in Ferry Lake on the day that we were there, and they were quite upset that there were a lot of people there because this was a space where their son had come to fish on a regular basis. They would take him, drop him off, he would fish for a while. He had medical issues and special needs, and he had recently passed away. So they had come to spend time with him and came across all of these people taking up his space. Her husband came back later and saw the wind phone and came home and told his wife, and they had a very emotional moment. She said the power of that phone, that they now go and use it to connect with her son.
The Barrie Colts off to a 1-3 start, one of those losses in a shootout, hoping to turn things around this weekend. Colts broadcaster Gene Pereira joins us again this season to track the team's progress with our Julius Hurd.
Well, Gene, we're 2 weeks into the Barrie Colts season. The team is 1-2-0-1. They won that first game pretty soundly, and now on a three-game losing streak. Pardon me. But let's go back to kind of the beginning of the season. When you're coming into the season, in your perspective, what were the biggest themes heading into this year?
Well, I think it really centered. There's a lot of new faces, and with the NHL. Prospects, first and foremost, expected the big three on defense to return, but the question with Cole Baldwin and Emil Henning getting a longer look, I think really the central focus was scoring. A lot of questions about who would step up and do the scoring for this team. I think when you look on the back end, Ben Revick in goal, one of the better goalies in the Ontario Hockey League, and a blue line that's going to be very deep, with some young talent there. I think the question is really about offense, just how much offense of this team, who is going to step up with and fill in the void that is left by the likes of, Bo Jelza and, players, Riley Patterson being traded and so on, who would fill that gap.
So obviously, preseason's a big kind of, testing point, I guess you could say, for that. Who impressed you the most in preseason when it comes to that offensive attack?
I think you look at a guy like Joseph Salantra, who's just been, you could see it, the knack, obviously, for scoring goals. And you heard a lot. That was something that he's able to provide. And obviously, there's some adjustment period for a lot of these guys, but he's certainly one. Will Schneid is another guy. And again, it's really these trio of Americans. Nicholas Desiderio rounds out that trio of Americans that have come over and have been impressive in the early start and really in camp. And Schneid and Solantra got off to a good start. And, look, they're still adapting to the Ontario Hockey League game, but you can see the skill, the talent there. And, those two guys are going to have to step up. And then, you got veterans like Carter Lowe, who's going to be expected to be a guy that, takes that next step and is going to get a bigger role as well. Brad Gardner's had an outstanding start to the season, and he's another guy that they're certainly counting on for bigger, a bigger role offensively.
Calvin Crombie gets acquired in the offseason from Brantford. How much does he add to that as well?
Yeah, he's impressed me. I mean, obviously you heard a lot about the grit he provides, the leadership as that an overager that, he's just a tough guy to play against. But then, what you see is this guy's pretty good offensively, given the opportunity. And, he's getting a bigger role here than in Brantford. And, he's getting the opportunities, and he's already scored a couple. And I think we're going to see more. I think we're going to see more offense from him. And, again, he's just one of those guys that wears his heart on his sleeve. And, he was really an addition, that Marty Williamson was excited about. He said he's more than just a leader. He's more than just a tough guy that provides that physical enforcer type. But, this is a guy that could put the puck in the net. I think he's showing that really early on.
You mentioned Marty Williamson, not behind the bench anymore, still in that GM role, but Dylan Smoskowitz now the head coach. What's different about having him behind the bench instead of Marty?
Yeah, I think Dylan, another guy, there's a lot more emotion there. I think, it's not to say that, Marty was kind of a little bit more stoic behind the bench there and stuff, but I think with Dylan, obviously, the youngest coach in the Ontario Hockey League, and, he brings that kind of excitement to the players, and, you can see it with the way he talks about the team. He's excited. He's always kind of trying to motivate these guys. I think the level again is, Dylan wants that shift in, shift out, that compete factor, and he's driving that. It's kind of been the central message with him, from day one is that, you get out there, you're going to earn your ice time, and, you have to compete, shift in and shift out.
He gets his first win, that season opener against Guelph. It still looked like a pretty smooth win. It was 6-2 at home, but since then, now 3 straight losses. What's kind of gone wrong for the team in that stretch? Because 2 of those games were also against Owen Sound.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, Owen Sound's going to be a much better team this year. I think they're showing that here early on. They're ready to take another step. And again, they carried play for the most part in that Thursday shootout loss, but, the Colts, they managed to get a point out of that one. And then Windsor, undefeated, 2 undefeated teams. The Spitfire is one of the top teams in the country, and, it's pretty amazing. They've still got 3 of their better players that aren't even there yet, back from NHL camps. So it really speaks to the talent level there. And I thought Barrie, again, the third period they pushed hard. They came back, ended up getting a 3-1 loss there, and then a 5-4 loss in Owen Sound. Again, I think Barrie played well in all 3, but, again, they come out with just 1 point and facing some stiff competition. But I think for a young team like that, obviously, I think the big part, the power play. I mean, if the power play was quicker, a little bit better. And again, when you get this early in the season, it kind of goes all over the place with power play and penalty kill special teams. You don't got the usual players that you expect. Obviously, Baldwin and Henning would be a big part of this power play if they came back. And, as well, just a lot of new faces getting used to one another. And I expect that to get better here as we move down the road.
Well, some of those NHL prospects have already come back. You mentioned Ben Hrebeck earlier on. Gabriel Eliason's been key, and Kayshawn Aitchison has come back and made an immediate impact. How important is having maybe those 3 guys specifically come back this early in the season?
Yeah, that's big. Evan Passmore, Aitchison, and Eliason. Those are 3 guys in a lot of ice time back there. They're going to play in the power play, the penalty kills. It's that veteran experience. They're all big physical guys as well, too. And, and then you get Justin Hanser coming back. You got Ethan Armstrong coming back. It's really a pretty deep blue line. It's one of the things that the Colts feel that's one of their strengths this season is And it's led by, obviously, the big three, returning from NHL camps, Passmore, and all those guys ready to step in the bigger roles. And obviously, Aitchison had a big season last year with his draft year. And but I mean, these are all three big guys that are going to log a ton of ice time. And when you add young talented guys back there like Cole Emerton and T. Vader, the blue line is one of the things that the Colts feel that is their strength. And the big three here are going to play a huge factor as you go down the road. They're going to log a ton of ice time.
Yeah, still early in the season, of course, but 1-2-0-1, as I mentioned. But this is a big weekend, you could say, coming up. Home to the Greyhounds on Thursday, home to the Generals on Saturday, then at Niagara on Sunday, and that team really looking like a powerhouse. How does this team approach this 3-game stretch?
Keeping the puck out, and that's a big factor. That's always going to keep you out of games. They got the blue line and stuff, and goaltending there. That's going to be a key factor. I mean, obviously the Greyhounds, another team that's taking a step up this season, coming off a big loss in Ottawa, so they'll be pretty hungry. But again, I think for Barrie, the most important thing is that they play sound defensively. That's going to keep you in hockey games, and then you find enough scoring to get by. But Niagara, another team, obviously on Sunday, but. Julius, I really think here that, you got to win these games at home. A lot of games here early on home ice, you got to kind of establish that you're a team that wins on home ice. And, the road is always tough. And Barrie was a pretty decent team last year on the road. You had a lot of veterans, but you want to get these games here on home ice.
Absolutely, and how important that comes into play in the playoffs, as we saw last season. Real quick before you go, just want to ask, around the league, what's the biggest surprise for you so far?
I think, Owen Sound, I think everybody kind of expected them, to take that step up. They look really good. I was really impressed with their structure when they came in the other night against Barrie here, and then back on Sunday a little bit. They were coming off a fairly busy weekend like Barrie, so it was a little bit more of a loose game than you expect, especially that second period with 6 goals. But this is an Owen Sound team that, again, you look at ready to take that big step. They just, I think, the better that good, early on here in the year. I think everybody expects them to be that much better, but kudos to them for getting off to the start they can and looking to turn things around.
Well, Gene, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. I'm looking forward to this next 3-game stretch. It's an important one.
Thanks, pal.
And that's our program for this week. Thanks to Ian and Julius for their input, to Matt Ladder for his technical expertise, and to you for listening. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe to What Barrie's Talking About. You can also keep up with What Barrie's Talking About on Blue Sky and X at Barrie 360, on our website, barrie360.com, and there's our daily Kickstart podcasts available from any streaming service and on our website. I'm Dan Blakeley. Hope you'll join us again next week.